Okay, graphing tangent, unit 10, day 3. So we're just going to fill out this chart like we did for sine and cosine. This time we're finding the value of sine and the value of cosine. And then tangent is sine over cosine. So we're just going to put sine over cosine, and that will be the tangent value. Okay? Sine is the y value, cosine is the x value. So we start with 0. The value of sine there is 0 because the y value is 0. The value of cosine is 1. So the value of tangent is 0 over 1, which equals 0. So the coordinate is 0, 0. Okay, let's go to pi 6. So the value of sine there is 1/2. And the value of cosine is the square root of 3 over 2. Which means the value of tangent is 1/2 divided by the square root of 3 over 2. Which I'm just going to rewrite that, so that's 1/2 divided by square root of 3 over 2. Flip that second fraction, so that's 1/2 times 2 over the square root of 3. Those 2's cancel and get 1 over the square root of 3. Get that square root out of the denominator, so it's times by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. And you get the square root of 3 over 3. So tangent of pi 6 equals the square root of 3 over 3. Which if you put that in your calculator, you'll get about 0.58. Okay, so the coordinate is pi 6 square root of 3 over 3. Then if we go to pi 4ths, the x value there is square root of 2 over 2. The y value is square root of 2 over 2, so sine is the square root of 2 over 2. Cosine is the square root of 2 over 2. And then the square root of 2 over 2 divided by the square root of 2 over 2 is just 1, because if you divide something by itself, you always get 1. So then my coordinate is pi 4ths, comma. Go to pi 3rds. My y value there is square root of 3 over 2. My x value is 1/2. So then tangent is y over x, so that's the square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1/2. Flip that fraction and multiply. Those 2's cancel, and you're just left with the square root of 3. So at pi 3rds, the value of tangent is square root of 3, which is about 1.73. And we want those decimals because it makes it easier to graph. So the coordinate is pi 3rds and then the square root of 3. Okay, if we go to pi halves, the y there is 1, the x there is 0, so tangent is 1 over 0, but you can't divide something by 0 because you can't divide something into 0 parts. That doesn't make sense. Like you can't divide a cookie into 0 parts because that would just mean that you ate the whole cookie. So it's undefined. And so at pi halves, the coordinate is undefined. Wherever it's undefined, we have an asymptote. I'll show you what that is in a minute. Okay, pause this video and fill out the rest of this chart. Once you've done that, that's what the chart should look like. Okay? Now let's graph this. So I labeled this the same way I labeled sine and cosine. So that first point is pi 6, halfway between is pi 4ths, and then the next point is pi 3rds. Then keep going, 2 pi 3rds, 3 pi 4ths, 5 pi 6. 7 pi 6, 5 pi 4ths, 4 pi 3rds, then 5 pi 3rds, 7 pi 4ths, 11 pi 6. Okay, and let's just start graphing this. Well, we have to label this first. So I'm going to label my high point 2, my low point -2, because we go up to 1.73. That's the only reason why I'm doing that. Halfway between is 1 and -1. Half of that is 0.5. Then halfway between 1 and 2 is 1.5. Okay, so we always start at 0, 0 for tangent. That's where that first coordinate is. At pi 6, it equals the square root of 3 over 3, which is about 0.58. Pi 4ths is 1. Pi 3rds is the square root of 3, which is about 1.73. Then at pi halves, it's undefined. So that's an asymptote. You just draw a dotted line right there. Sorry, I'm like sick right now. And then pi thirds is negative square root of 3, so that's negative 0.75. Pi fourths is negative 1, or 3 pi fourths, sorry. 5 pi 6 is negative square root of 3 over 3, so that's negative 0.58. At pi, it's 0. 7 pi 6 is square root of 3 over 3, so that's about 0.58. 5 pi fourths is 1. 4 pi thirds is the square root of 3, which is about 1.73. And then 3 pi halves, we have another asymptote. So if we look right here, I just want you to realize there are 3 units there, like 1, 2, 3, right? Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we just double whatever that is. Okay? Let's just keep drawing this. So 5 pi thirds, that's negative square root of 3. So that's negative 1.7, or 1.73. 7 pi fourths is negative 1. 11 pi 6 is negative square root of 3 over 3. So that's about 0.58. And then 2 pi is 0. Okay, and when you draw this, you never touch the asymptote. You can't cross the asymptote. So that's just going to go up, and it's going to follow along that asymptote forever. This middle one, same thing. It's going to go down, follow the asymptote, go up, follow that. And then that one just goes down. Cool? Okay, let's label these. So the amplitude here is undefined. For tangent is always undefined. Because we don't have a high point, we don't have a low point. This goes up and down forever, so there is no amplitude. There is an A value, but we'll talk about that in a second. It's a little bit different. Okay? The period is pi over b. For sine and cosine, it was 2 pi over b. For tangent, it's pi over b. Horizontal shift is still c. Vertical shift is still d. Frequency, instead of being b over 2 pi, for tangent, it's b over pi. Okay, and then I want you to add one. The midline is y equals d, just like it was in other ones. And then the asymptote is the period divided by 2. So once you find the period, you can divide that by 2 and you'll get your asymptote. Okay? Now evaluating these. If you have a calculator, I want you to pull out your calculator right now because I want to show you another way to do this without using the unit circle or using that chart that we just made, because on the test, I don't think you want to write that whole chart on your note card. So evaluate the following functions where h of x equals tangent of x. And we have to write your answers in exact form. So if h of x equals tangent of x, that means h of 7 pi fourths equals tangent of 7 pi fourths. You can put that into your calculator. You just have to make sure it's in radian mode. So if you go up to the top where it says mode, it's like the third one down, you just have to make sure the radian is highlighted. You put that in your calculator and you get -1. So it does it for you. Okay? Same thing with pi 6. So tangent of pi 6, put that into your calculator, you get 0.577. Well, 0.577 is the same thing as the square root of 3 over 2. So that equals the square root of 3 over 2. Okay, 3 pi halves, that's tangent of 3 pi halves. When you put that in, you get an error. If you get an error, that means it's undefined. Okay, we're going to save B, D, and F for class just so that we can go over that again. Okay, and let's graph this. So for sine and cosine, we labeled A and B values. For tangent, we're going to label B and D values. Okay, because our A value, I'm not going to put an A value there ever. You could, but we're not going to for our purposes. Okay, so our B value is 1. Our D value is 2. So we're going to use B to find the period. The period's pi over B, so that's pi over 1, which just equals pi. Once you find the period, we have to find asymptotes. So the asymptotes are the period divided by 2. Well, our period is pi, so that's pi divided by 2. And I'm going to go to pi over 2, and that's where I'm going to draw my first asymptote. Okay, and then if you think back to when we were just graphing that, how I talked about there were like 3 units between the first asymptote and 0, and so then there were 6 between the next. Well, here we have 2 units between 0 and pi halves. So I'm going to go 4, and that will be my next asymptote. So at 3 pi halves, there's my next asymptote. Okay, now D is where we start the graph, so I'm going to start at D right there. And then you always go over 1 or over whatever halfway between that point and the asymptote, and you go up 1. So I'm going to go up 1 right there, and then that's going to be that part of the graph because I can't go to the left because that would be off the graph that we're given. Okay, then I'm going to go halfway between those 2 asymptotes in the middle, which is at pi, and I'm still going to start at that same point. So I'm going to start my D value at 2. Then I'm going to go over 1, up 1, and over to the left 1, down 1. So there's that point, and that's halfway between that point and the asymptote. Then I go halfway between that point and that asymptote, and I go down 1. I'm going to do the same thing at 2 pi because I can just draw part of this graph. So there's that point. I go to the left one. You could go to the right one there, but we're not going to. Then we can just draw this. So that first part just goes along that asymptote. There's the middle part, and there's the right part. Okay, not too bad. Let's do one more example. I'm going to always rewrite that as tangent of 1/3 x minus 1. So my b is 1/3, my d is -1. So my period is pi divided by b, which is pi divided by 1/3. So that's pi divided by 1/3. You can flip that fraction. That's pi times 3/1, which is 3 pi. So my asymptote is 3 pi divided by 2. That's not clearly on my graph, but 3 pi is right here. I think I did this in here actually. 3 pi is right there. So between 0 and 3 pi, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little tick marks, right? So if I just go 3 of those tick marks, that would be 3 pi divided by 2. So that's where that line is. Then there's 3 between 0 and 3 pi halves. So I'm going to go 6 to my next asymptote. And there's that. Okay. Then you start at your D value. So we start at -1. And this time I'm not going to go over 1, up 1. I'm just going to go halfway between 0 and that asymptote. So about 1.5. And then I'm going to go up 1. Maybe. And there's that point. Okay. Then I'm going to go to 3 pi because that's the middle of those next 2 asymptotes. Go down to -1. And then I'm going to go to the left 1.5 because that's halfway between those 2 or that point in the asymptote. And I'm going to go down 1. Then I'm going to go right 1.5 and go up 1. And then at 6 pi, I draw that point right there. And I go left 1.5, down 1. Maybe. Okay, then we can just graph this. That part goes up. There's the middle part. Maybe. There's the middle part, there's the right part. Okay? Remember to take the quiz, and I'll see you guys when I see ya.